Have you ever been completely wrong about someone you love? I thought my husband had forgotten our 10th wedding anniversary when he didn't show up to our special dinner. I sat alone at that restaurant for nearly 2 hours, humiliated, furious, ready to tear him apart when I got home. But when I walked through that front door, what I found wasn't betrayal or indifference. It was something that made me realize how quickly everything we take for granted can change. This is the story of the night that taught me the difference between what we think matters and what actually does. If you've ever jumped to conclusions about someone's actions, if you've ever felt forgotten or unimportant, or if you've ever realized that your problems weren't as big as you thought they were, this story will hit you right in the heart. Tonight, I'm sharing the most vulnerable moment of my marriage, a night that started with anger and ended with a love deeper than I ever knew existed. Stay with me, because this story will change how you see the small frustrations in your own relationships. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror in our Maple Ridge Drive home, adjusting the pearl necklace that Ryan had given me for our 5th anniversary. The Connecticut autumn light filtered through our bay windows, casting a golden glow across the antique vanity that had belonged to my grandmother. These pearls had that perfect creamy luster that complemented my navy Diane von Furstenberg dress, the one Ryan always said made my blue eyes look like sapphires. At 38, I'd learned to appreciate the way time had sculpted my face, adding character lines that Ryan insisted were proof of all the laughter we'd shared. The house felt unusually quiet without our 16-year-old twins, Blake and Savannah, who were staying at friends' houses for the weekend. Ryan had left early that morning for what he called urgent business matters, something that had been happening with increasing frequency over the past few months. I pushed down the nagging worry that had been growing in the pit of my stomach. Today was October 15th, our 10th wedding anniversary. 10 years since we'd promised each other forever in the small chapel outside Hartford, where Ryan had nervously fumbled with my ring and made everyone laugh during our first dance. He'd always had this incredible gift for turning potentially embarrassing moments into treasured memories that we'd retell at dinner parties for years to come. But lately, something felt different about my husband. Ryan seemed distant, preoccupied, carrying invisible weights that he wouldn't share with me. I'd find him awake at 3 a.m, sitting by our bedroom window, staring out at nothing with eyes that looked older than his 40 years. When I'd curl up beside him and ask what was troubling him, he'd pull me close, kiss my forehead, and say he was just thinking about work projects. "Tonight we forget all about work," I whispered to my reflection, applying the deep red Tom Ford lipstick I reserved for our most special occasions. The Chanel No. 5 that Ryan had surprised me with last Christmas filled the air as I sprayed it delicately on my pulse points. 7:15 on the vintage Cartier clock on our nightstand. Plenty of time to drive to the Sterling Oak restaurant where we had an 8 o'clock reservation. It wasn't the fanciest place in Hartford County, but it was our place. The restaurant, where Ryan had nervously proposed 14 years ago, where we'd celebrated every anniversary since, where the maitre d' knew our names and our usual table by the window. I picked up the small Tiffany & Co. box from my jewelry drawer, inside which lay the Rolex Submariner that Ryan had been admiring in the boutique window for months. I'd saved for 12 weeks, skipping my usual spa appointments and morning lattes at the local cafe, all to see the look on his face when he opened this gift. Inside the accompanying card, I'd written in my careful script, "To 10 more years of moments that make every second worth it." The drive to the restaurant in my BMW X5M competition was smooth, the leather seats still carrying the scent of the premium detailing I'd had done for tonight. I parked under the restaurant's elegant awning, checked my makeup one final time in the rearview mirror, and walked into what I believed would be a perfect celebration of our decade together. "Mrs. Thompson, what an absolute pleasure to have you back with us again." Marcus, the maitre d', greeted me with the warm familiarity of someone who'd watched our relationship bloom over the years. His salt and pepper beard was impeccably groomed, and his smile held genuine affection for the couple who'd become part of the Sterling Oaks extended family. The restaurant's interior glowed with soft amber lighting, crystal chandeliers casting dancing shadows on cream-colored walls adorned with oil paintings of the Connecticut countryside. Fresh white orchids, my favorite flowers, graced every table, their sweet fragrance mixing with the rich aromas of truffle oil and aged wine from the kitchen. "Has my husband arrived yet, Marcus?" I asked, smoothing down my dress as we walked past tables filled with couples celebrating their own special moments. The click of my Louboutin heels on the polished hardwood floors created a rhythm that matched my slightly quickened heartbeat. "Not yet, Mrs. Thompson, but your table is ready as always." Our table by the window overlooked the restaurant's private garden, where tiny white lights twinkled like earthbound stars among the carefully manicured rose bushes and Japanese maples that had turned brilliant shades of crimson and gold. I settled into the plush velvet chair, placing my Hermes clutch and the wrapped Rolex box on the empty seat across from me. The chair that should have held my husband sat there like a silent accusation, its burgundy upholstery catching the light from the antique brass sconce on the wall. "Perhaps some wine while you wait?" asked James, our usual server, a young man, who'd been working at the Sterling Oak since he was in college and now knew our preferences by heart. "Yes, please. A glass of the Dom Pérignon. We're celebrating tonight." The lie tasted bitter, even as I spoke it, because how could we be celebrating when half of the celebration was missing? I checked my iPhone, 8:05, and no message. From Ryan. It wasn't like him to be late, especially not for something this important. Ryan Thompson was the kind of man who arrived 15 minutes early to everything, who planned our date nights weeks in advance, who never forgot a birthday, anniversary, or meaningful moment in our relationship. I sent him a quick text. "I'm at the restaurant. Is everything okay?" The champagne arrived in a crystal flute, the bubbles rising like tiny prayers toward the rim. I took a small sip, tasting the crisp perfection on my tongue while my eyes remained fixed on the restaurant's heavy oak door, waiting for it to open and reveal my husband's familiar silhouette. Around me, the restaurant filled with the soft murmur of conversation and clinking silverware. A distinguished gentleman with silver hair at the table beside mine presented his wife with a pair of diamond earrings, causing her to gasp with delight and press her hand to her heart. They looked to be in their 60s, still making grand romantic gestures, still choosing to celebrate their love with expensive tokens and intimate dinners. I found myself studying their faces, wondering if they'd ever experienced a night like this one, where love felt more like abandonment and celebration, felt more like humiliation. 8:30 came and went like a slow-moving storm cloud. I sent another message to Ryan. "Daniel, is everything okay? I'm getting worried." The autocorrect had changed his name, but I was too anxious to notice or care about such trivial mistakes. My champagne glass sat nearly empty, the golden liquid, having lost its festive sparkle and now tasting flat against my increasingly dry mouth. James approached our table with the practiced discretion of someone who'd witnessed countless relationship dramas unfold in this very dining room. "Would you like to order an appetizer while you wait, Mrs. Thompson?" His voice carried just the right amount of professional concern mixed with gentle suggestion. "I'll wait a little longer, thank you, James." I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the slight tremor that betrayed my growing unease. The restaurant continued to fill around me, the energy becoming more vibrant as other couples settled into their evening routines of shared stories, intimate laughter, and the comfortable silence that comes with deep familiarity. A young couple, 2 tables over, was clearly on one of their first dates, their conversation punctuated by nervous giggles and the kind of eager eye contact that spoke of new attraction. I remembered being that young, that uncertain, that thrilled by the simple act of sharing a meal with someone who made my heart race. By 9 o'clock, I'd finished a second glass of champagne, and worry had transformed into something sharper and more painful, embarrassment mixed with anger. The maitre d' had started giving me those carefully neutral looks that restaurant staff perfect for situations exactly like this one. Other diners were beginning to notice the woman sitting alone, with a gift-wrapped box, checking her phone every 30 seconds, like she was expecting news that never came. An elderly couple at a nearby table whispered to each other while casting subtle glances in my direction, and I could practically hear their unspoken commentary. Poor woman stood up on what looks like a special occasion. The gift box seemed to mock me from its perch on Ryan's empty chair, wrapped in elegant silver paper with a navy blue ribbon that matched my dress. It felt like a metaphor for my entire evening, something beautiful and carefully prepared, sitting abandoned and unappreciated while life moved on around it. I caught my reflection in the window glass, superimposed over the twinkling garden lights, and saw a woman who looked sophisticated and put together on the surface, but whose eyes betrayed a deep hurt that was growing with each passing minute. The Connecticut countryside beyond the garden had disappeared into autumn darkness, leaving only my ghostly reflection staring back at me with questions I couldn't answer. The champagne had gone to my head slightly, creating a warm buzz that couldn't quite mask the cold realization that something was terribly wrong. In 10 years of marriage, Ryan had never simply forgotten about me. He was the man who remembered the anniversary of our first kiss, who surprised me with flowers on random Tuesdays just because, who would drive across town to get my favorite chocolate when I was having a difficult day. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was something else entirely, and the not knowing was eating at me from the inside out. At 9:45, I finally surrendered to the inevitable and signaled for James to bring me the check. There was no dignity left in sitting there for another moment, pretending that my husband might still walk through that door with a reasonable explanation and a sheepish smile. "Won't you be having dinner tonight, Mrs. Thompson?" James asked gently. His young face creased with genuine concern for a woman he'd served dozens of times over the years. He'd probably seen us laughing over shared desserts, holding hands across this very table, celebrating promotions and anniversaries and all the small victories that make up a marriage. "Not tonight, James. Thank you for your patience." I paid the bill with my American Express black card, leaving a tip that was probably too generous, my way of apologizing for the awkwardness I'd brought to their elegant dining room. The other staff members watched discreetly as I gathered my things, their professional training warring with human curiosity about the story behind the abandoned anniversary dinner. I walked to the door with my head held high, my spine straight, channeling every lesson my mother had taught me about maintaining grace under pressure. But the moment I stepped outside into the crisp October air and the restaurant door closed behind me, I felt the carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. The drive home through the quiet suburban streets of our Connecticut neighborhood passed in a blur of streetlights and the soft hum of my BMW's engine. My mind raced through possible explanations, each one more troubling than the last. Had Ryan forgotten our anniversary entirely? Was he having an affair? Had something happened to him? The not knowing was worse than any specific fear because it left room for my imagination to create increasingly dark scenarios. Our house came into view, a beautiful colonial revival with white columns and black shutters that had been featured in Hartford Magazine's Homes of Distinction just 2 years earlier. The sight that greeted me in our circular driveway made my heart skip. Ryan's Mercedes-Benz AMG GT was there, parked in its usual spot. He'd been home. The entire time I was sitting at that restaurant, feeling humiliated and forgotten, my husband had been here in our house. The anger that I'd been holding back finally broke free like water through a dam. I sat in my car for a full minute, rehearsing the sharp words I would say, the questions I would demand answers to, the hurt I would make sure he understood he'd caused. How could he have simply forgotten? How could he have left me sitting there? Like that? In 10 years of marriage, we'd had our disagreements, our moments of frustration, but never something like this. Never this level of thoughtless cruelty that made me question whether he still valued what we'd built together. I grabbed my purse and the unopened gift and marched toward our front door, my heels clicking against the brick walkway like a countdown to confrontation. The house was mostly dark, except for the warm light spilling from our kitchen windows, creating golden rectangles on the perfectly manicured lawn that our landscaping service maintained twice weekly. I could see Ryan's silhouette through the window, sitting at our kitchen island, and my anger flared even brighter. There he was, comfortable in our beautiful home, while I'd been sitting alone in a restaurant, wondering if our marriage meant anything to him anymore. I pushed through the front door with more force than necessary, the sound echoing through our marble foyer. "Ryan, what the hell?" The words died in my throat like someone had physically reached in and stolen my voice. My husband was indeed sitting at our kitchen island, but this wasn't the scene I'd expected to walk into. Ryan's shoulders were slumped in a way I'd never seen before. His usually perfect posture collapsed, as if he were carrying invisible weights too heavy for his frame. His face was pale, almost gray, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of exhaustion that went deeper than lost sleep. Scattered across our marble countertop were papers, medical forms, and what looked like test results, creating a chaos that was completely foreign to our usually immaculate home. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something in his eyes that stopped my prepared anger cold. Fear, raw and unmistakable, mixed with a vulnerability I'd rarely seen in my strong, capable husband. On his left wrist, still attached, was a white hospital bracelet with his name and a date from earlier that day. The sight of it hit me like a physical blow, and suddenly the elegant Hermes clutch and the carefully wrapped Rolex box slipped from my hands, hitting our Italian tile floor with sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. All the indignation, all the hurt feelings, all the rehearsed accusations evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold dread that settled in my stomach like ice. Madison. His voice was hoarse, unrecognizable, nothing like the warm baritone that whispered, "Good morning" to me every day or laughed at our inside jokes over dinner. "I'm sorry about tonight. I couldn't." I moved closer on unsteady legs, my eyes catching fragments of words on the scattered medical documents. Electrocardiogram, cardiac enzymes, immediate follow-up required, and at the top of one form, today's date. The papers seemed to blur together, but the hospital letterhead was clear enough. And suddenly, everything about the past few months clicked into place with horrible clarity. The sleepless nights, the distracted looks, the way he'd been avoiding our usual morning jogs together. "What is all this?" I asked, though somewhere in my heart I already knew the answer was something that would change our lives forever. Ryan ran his hand through his hair, the gesture I'd seen thousands of times over the years. His tell when he was nervous, anxious, or trying to find the right words for something difficult. It was the same gesture he'd made when he proposed, when we found out I was pregnant with the twins, when he'd been laid off from his first job out of college. Now it carried a weight that made my chest tighten with anticipation of words I didn't want to hear. "I've been having chest pains for about 6 weeks," he said slowly, each word seeming to cost him tremendous effort. At first, I thought it was just stress from the Patterson acquisition at work, but yesterday... He paused, swallowing hard, and I could see his hands trembling slightly as they rested on the counter. Yesterday, during the board meeting, the pain became unbearable. Jim from accounting had to drive me to Hartford Hospital's emergency room because I couldn't even walk to my car. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that was consuming everything I'd thought I knew about our life together. I sank into the chair beside him, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight as the full magnitude of what he was telling me settled over me like a heavy blanket. Everything made sense now. The mysterious early morning departures, the phone, calls he'd taken his study with the door closed, the way he'd been hugging me a little tighter and a little longer recently, as if he were trying to memorize the feeling. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out as barely a whisper, and I reached for his hands, covering them with mine and feeling how cold his fingers were despite the warmth of our kitchen. "I didn't want to worry you until I knew something definitive," he said, his voice breaking slightly on the last word. The cardiologist wants to do more comprehensive tests next week. There might be blockages that require surgery. The word surgery seemed to echo in our kitchen, bouncing off the custom cabinets and granite surfaces, settling into every corner of our carefully curated life. I looked at this man I'd shared a bed with for 10 years, the father of my children, my partner in everything from mortgage payments to midnight feedings to dreams of retirement in Tuscany. How had I not seen that he was carrying this fear alone? How had I been so focused on anniversary dinners and gift-wrapped watches that I'd missed the fact that my husband was terrified he might be dying? Were you at the hospital tonight? During our dinner? Ryan nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I had to go back for additional blood work and another EKG. I didn't get home until about an hour ago. I tried calling you from the hospital, but my phone died, and when I got home and plugged it in, it still wouldn't turn on properly. I closed my eyes, feeling tears that I'd been holding back all evening finally spill over. While I'd been sitting in that restaurant feeling sorry for myself, nursing champagne and wounded pride, my husband had been in a sterile hospital room, getting tests that might determine how much time we had left together. Why didn't you call me from the hospital phone? I would have come to you immediately. The hurt in my voice wasn't about the missed dinner anymore. It was about being excluded from the most frightening experience my husband had ever faced. Because it's our anniversary, Madison. 10 years. His voice cracked completely now, and I saw tears in his eyes that he'd been fighting to hold back. I had made that reservation weeks ago. I bought you those orchids from the expensive place downtown. I picked up your gift from Tiffany's. I wanted tonight to be perfect for you, and instead, he gestured helplessly at the medical papers spread across our counter. That's when I noticed them, the premium white orchids in a crystal vase on our counter, probably costing $220 from the exclusive florist he always used for special occasions. And beside them, a small velvet box that I recognized from Tiffany & Co., even facing the possibility of heart surgery, even scared and exhausted from medical tests, Ryan had still tried to make our anniversary special for me. Ryan, I whispered, moving closer and taking his face in my hands. None of this matters. The dinner, the gifts, the perfect anniversary, none of it matters if I don't have you. And for the first time since I'd known him, my strong, protective husband completely broke down, letting me see the fear he'd been carrying alone for weeks. We held each other in our kitchen that night, surrounded by medical papers and expensive gifts that suddenly seemed meaningless in the face of what we were confronting. I thought about all the times I'd gotten annoyed over trivial things. Socks left on the bathroom floor, him working late, forgetting to pick up dry cleaning. How petty it all seemed now when measured against the possibility of losing him entirely. We're going to face this together, I said firmly, surprising myself with how strong my voice sounded. Whatever the tests show, whatever treatment you need, we're in this together. You don't carry this alone anymore. That night, we didn't celebrate our anniversary the way we'd planned. There was no candlelit dinner, no champagne toast, no dancing in our living room to the song from our wedding. Instead, we sat at our kitchen table, making lists of questions for the cardiologist, researching the best cardiac surgeons in Connecticut, and planning how we'd tell Blake and Savannah without terrifying them. Later, lying in our king-sized bed, I listened to Ryan's breathing beside me, my hand resting on his chest, feeling each heartbeat like a precious gift. The future that had always seemed guaranteed now felt uncertain. But there was one thing I knew for sure. The love we'd built over 10 years was strong enough to face whatever came next. In the darkness, I whispered, "I love you, Ryan Thompson." "I love you more," he whispered back. And I realized that sometimes the most profound celebrations happen not in restaurants or with expensive gifts, but in quiet moments when two people choose to face their fears together, heart to heart, beat by beat. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of what really matters in your relationships, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss. Our stories about real love, real challenges, and real people. Share this with someone who needs to remember that the small problems in life aren't really problems at all. And let me know in the comments. Have you ever completely misunderstood a situation with someone you love? Your story might help someone else realize they're not alone. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.